Welcome. My name is Haley Soifer, and as CEO of the Jewish Democratic Council of America, I want to thank you all for joining us today for our community conversation, Escaping the Taliban, Evacuating Americans, Afghan Refugees, and Partners. Last week, we gathered with Representative Jake Auchincloss and Dr. Evelyn Farkas to discuss how the situation in Afghanistan has unfolded and what lessons might be learned for the United States in similar conflicts going forward. A lot has happened since we last met, including a report today of the tragic explosions near the airport in Kabul, which has caused a number of casualties, including U.S. personnel. We are deeply concerned about the safety of Americans and our allies in Afghanistan, and our prayers are with the families affected by the violence today. Today, we're going to look specifically at the evacuations of Americans and our partners fleeing the Taliban and consider what more we can all do to ensure the safety, security, and resettlement of our allies. Today, we are also honored to be joined by leading voices and experts. Our program will be divided into 3 segments, each featuring leaders whose voices and efforts have been essential in recent weeks on this topic. First, we'll hear from Representative Andy Kim of New Jersey, followed by Mark Hetfield, President and CEO of HIAS, and then Naomi Steinberg, the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at HIAS, will take questions. Each will shed light on the ongoing effort to evacuate Americans and others fleeing the Taliban and resettle our Afghan partners and refugees in the United States. Throughout the event, we encourage you to please submit your questions in the Zoom, as there will be multiple opportunities for audience questions, and we will do our best to get to all of them. To introduce today's speakers, I will now turn it over to JDCA board member and programming chair, Susie Stern. Susie.
Welcoming the stranger is an integral part of our Jewish values, and we're most anxious to hear our esteemed speakers today. Congressman Andy Kim represents New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District, and before being elected to Congress in 2018, Representative Kim was a career public servant at a number of important federal agencies, including USAID, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House National Security Council. He also has direct experience in Afghanistan when serving as an advisor to General Petraeus and General Allen. Recently, Representative Kim has been leading the charge to evacuate our allies fleeing the Taliban in Afghanistan as a member of both the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. His unique experience and exemplary career as a public servant and bold initiatives make him a rising star in Congress. Representative Kim is a great friend of JDCA and an ally to the Jewish community, and it's a privilege to have him join us today. Mark Hetfield is the president and CEO of HIAS, an organization rooted in Jewish values and that provides services to refugees and asylum seekers around the world. Probably many of our members of our family were helped by HIAS in an earlier time. As an expert in refugee and immigration law, policy, and programs, Mark Hetfield has spent his career helping refugees around the world. After becoming the president and CEO of HIAS in 2013, Mark led its transformation from an organization focused on Jewish immigrants to a global agency assisting refugees of all faiths and ethnicities, and has cemented HIAS as a major partner of the United Nations Refugee Agency and the U.S. Department of State. He is a frequent commentator and writer on refugee issues on television, radio, newspapers, and other media outlets. Mark, thank you so much for your lifelong commitment to refugees and resettlement, and thank you for being with us today. And Naomi Steinberg is the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at HIAS. Prior to joining HIAS, Naomi was the Director of Refugee Council of USA, RCUSA, an organization dedicated to welcoming and protecting refugees in the United States Refugee Resettlement Program. As director, she managed communications with international, federal, and state partners and oversaw all of RCUSA's function. Naomi, we appreciate you joining us here today, and I'm now going to turn it back to Haley.
Great. Well, we're thrilled to be joined first by Representative Andy Kim from New Jersey, and we'll just get right to it. Representative Kim, you have been a leading voice responding to developments in Afghanistan and helping those fleeing the Taliban, and we want to thank you for your leadership. What has been most surprising to you about what has transpired in Afghanistan in recent weeks? Where has the United States been successful in evacuating those fleeing the Taliban? And what are the largest challenges that remain for us ahead?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Haley. Thanks, everybody, for giving me an opportunity to address. I just want to. I just want to start by saying, I think a lot of us are concerned and very worried about the attack that we just had at the Kabul airport. I've been trying to get information about the casualties on the U.S. side and across the board, but it's certainly something that we're all very fearful of, and I know it's been on a lot of our minds. So just keep thinking about all the people that are in harm's way right now. When it comes to the questions about what was most surprising and elements like that, I there will be a time when we can take a step back and look at sort of the elements that happened over the course of the last couple of weeks. Perhaps it's not surprising, but I get so furious when I think about just how quickly the Afghan leadership just abandoned ship and left without any types of protocols that would help their people, anything that could help put in the conditions by which Afghans could get to safety and situations like that. It's something that I haven't had too much time to linger on. Because so much of my effort has been focused on just trying to get as many people out and to safety as possible. But it's something that does kind of keep in my mind. In terms of the U.S. effort, I mean, it's having been in the national security space before, I know a airlift of this magnitude is beyond anything I've certainly seen and imagined. But to pull this together, it is certainly an extraordinary feat. I have had frustrations with certainly the challenges of how to communicate through all this chaos. I still have, my office, we set up an email address over a week ago to try to help with people fleeing. We've now received over 6,000 cases of people trying to flee and get evacuated. Each of those cases, many of them have multiple family members. So we're talking about tens of thousands of people fleeing just to my office alone. And we've been able to help some, but it is clear that we're not going to be able to help everybody. And I think the real question right now is, what is the conditions by which we're going to, as a country, say that this is our last airplane out of there? And, I think that's going to be one of the most difficult decisions that this president's going to have to make.
Thank you. You referenced it briefly, but if you could talk for a moment about your service in Afghanistan and how that's informed your work in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's about 10 years ago, actually, exactly 10 years ago to this day, I was out in Afghanistan. I was a State Department officer working in diplomacy, was over on the military side. So I was a civilian advisor to the 4-star commander out in Afghanistan, which was General Petraeus when I got there, and then General Allen as I was leaving, as there was a change of command there. So, that experience was really powerful. Was being there at the height of U.S. troops. I think it was about 110,000 U.S. Service members when I was out there. And seeing that and then contrasting it with the experience that I had as a member of Congress going to Afghanistan in 2019, that was, it was the exact same military base actually that I was hosted at in 2019 than the one I worked in. I got a briefing in the same exact room that, that 9 years earlier I was briefing members of Congress in. So that was a very profound experience. It's kind of seeing this situation evolve over the course of the last 20 years, seeing how so many of the problems that we faced remained the same, or took just slightly different forms. So those are some of the issues that I've dealt with, but it's also something that has given me significant contacts and experience with the Afghan people, and I think that that's what makes this tragedy right now so personal for me. And the people that I'm trying to help, some of these are people I've known for a long time. Just trying to get them out of there, get them to safety, and especially because I know how much they worked, how much of their work, protected people like me, and helped me and our service members out, whether through the interpreters or the cultural advisors or the others. These are people we worked hand in hand on.
Well, on that note, Miriam has asked, and I would encourage all of our audience members to post a question in the chat. Probably one of the most relevant questions in this moment, which is, for those who cannot get to the airport, what can the United States do to help evacuate them and bring them to safety?
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, right now we are trying to get as many people to the airport as possible. Um, for American citizens, for permanent residents, for green card holders, for others, um, we do have means to be able to transport. And if people need to get to help, please let me know as we're working around the clock to try to help them get out. When it comes to Afghans, those that are eligible for SIV, P1, P2 visas, we're trying to widen that net. I, for one, am still someone that believes that we have a mission to do, and we need to make sure that we finish that mission of getting these people out of there. So there is some capacity for transit as well, whether through the U.S. or through other means. So again, I stand by to help as much as possible. I can make no promises, but beyond the fact that the only promise I can make is that we're going to do everything we can. From my office standpoint, our office email that we're utilizing, if you have somebody that needs help, is rep REPKIM, repkim evac EVAC, repkim evac at mail.house.gov. And please let us know if there's anything else that we can do on that front. But there are a number of different streams by which people can get out. The U.S. government is not the only game in town. There are other efforts. Charter flights are still going. Other types of flights are still going. So some of the people that I've been able to help, they are not eligible for evac by the U.S. because they don't fit under the criteria. Some of them don't fit under the criteria by which the U.S. is evacuating. So that I can try to channel through other means. So certainly you can try to help in any way we can.
Well, you had mentioned SIVs, the special immigrant visas, and we'll note that earlier this year, you were part of an effort to pass legislation that included additional funding for resettling SIVs. But at this stage, it does look like additional funding is needed for resettlement of Afghan refugees. Can you talk about what next steps Congress can take to provide additional funding and support?
Yeah, Haley, you and I, we've been, in this national security space for enough years to know that, these problems with SIVs have been longstanding. We went through the same exact problem when it came to Iraq and the SIV challenges with Iraq. So we knew this was coming. This was not an unforeseen problem, which is why I get so frustrated right now that this backlog has grown to such a level. And this is something that multiple presidencies have just pushed back. So it's just it frustrates me so much because we knew this was a problem, and we knew that it wasn't given the kind of attention that it should. There's a lot in Congress that we're going to need to be able to do. This is shifting right now. Just a couple minutes ago, literally just before I jumped on this, I was being briefed out about how the joint military base in my district, McGuire-Dix-Lakehurst, now has just shy of 1,000 Afghan refugees on our joint base. So in my district, we're hosting, we're one of a handful of bases around the country. This is going to be a long-standing issue. We have thousands of Afghans here in the U.S. That number will grow. We have thousands in different countries around the world. The amount of effort that we're going to have to put in to try to accelerate this process to the fastest possible while still ensuring safety protocols, this is going to be an enormous feat. So the ability for us to be able to do this, the resources that we're going to need, this is completely different than what we were looking at even just a couple of weeks ago. So just the logistics here is extraordinary, and we're still trying to figure out what exactly is needed. We're all operating off of just emergency operations right now, but we're going to have to do it, and I hope Congress steps up and we do our part for what is needed on there.
We've heard from the White House that all Americans who wish to leave will be able to do so. That said, the deadline of August 31st is looming. I think it's 6 days. And we have a question from Drew, who asks, would you be in favor of surpassing that deadline in order to continue the evacuation mission? So really 2 questions. Do you think all Americans will get out, and do we need to extend that deadline?
Well, look, the mission is to get every American citizen and permanent resident out of there that wants to go. I, for one, also believe that that we do have a responsibility to take as many of our Afghan partners that helped us as possible. So that's the mission. And certainly when it comes to our citizens, and that is the absolute mission. And if we're not able to get all of our citizens out by the 31st, I think we have to continue on until we can get them. In terms of those that want to go, yes, it's very dangerous. And I saw someone just posted. I've seen the reports as well of casualties, if not fatalities, that have been incurred today. It is a very dangerous space there right now. And we've been briefed on that, and certainly, we have seen with this attack just how dangerous it is. But also recognizing that, as a result, we also cannot leave behind U.S. citizens in that kind of danger. Once we leave, we have no understanding of whether or not the international airport in Kabul is able to continue. There is no assurance, no operator that can handle that right now. The Taliban is not capable of managing that airport. So if we go and there are American citizens still remaining, I do not see how they'd be able to get out of there. And unless the administration can explain to me, what kind of conditions are going to be left such that people will be able to go safely, I do think we have to continue despite the danger.
We have a question from Steve Stern, which is similar to, I think, the question on all of our minds, but he's specifically asking, I think from New Jersey, he's anxious to help the refugees at the base that you reference. What is the best way, frankly, for us all to help those Afghan refugees who have arrived in the United States?
Yeah, well, look, it starts by, a welcoming tone. I certainly am proud that we can do our part in our district. There are only a handful of communities around the U.S. right now that are hosting Afghan refugees. That number will grow, but the fact that our humble community of Burlington County, Ocean County here in New Jersey is one of them. I'm proud of that, and I hope that they feel welcomed. I hope people will welcome them. I've been in touch, as I said, with the commander on the ground, as well as some of the NGOs that are starting to ramp up. Red Cross and others are ramping up at our facility. I expect that sometime within the next day or so, I'll have more detailed information as I'm working with these NGOs and how we can potentially have some donations and other types of efforts. We very much see the people showing up with literally just the clothes that they're wearing. This is something that we're taking stock right now, cataloging what material that is needed. And then, I'll have a channel for us to be able to facilitate that. And that'll be something that not only just the people in my district, in our area, like I said, there are multiple bases around the country. There'll be multiple sites. Also, I'm sure there'll be other types of financial support and other things like that these NGOs will need. So, Haley, I'll stay in touch with you and this team just to make sure you have the latest information on how to help. But it is also not going to be a short-term effort. This is going to be a long-term effort in terms of, making its way through a lot. So what I ask in particular is yes, I know a lot of us are focused on this right now. It is on the front pages of newspapers and the headlines of news. But please pay attention in September. Please pay attention in October and November. Please pay attention as this moves forward. I have seen too many instances where we have a tragedy that we're responding to as a country, only to see that kind of attention dissipate within a matter of days and weeks. And I really hope that doesn't happen here.
Well, thank you. We have Pamela in New Jersey has asked if you will post on your website how people can help and whether there'll be a wish list for those who arrive, or a list of that what is needed that people, especially in New Jersey, can bring to the base.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll certainly make sure that our website, you can follow on social at Andy Kim NJ, and we'll make sure that we have all that information out there for people, and try to get that out as widely as possible. So as soon as we get the green light in terms of the channel, I will be very active in trying to get that word out to everybody and try to help coordinate that.
Great. Well, we know your time is limited, and we're grateful that on such a busy and difficult day, you've taken the time to join us, including from the car. We're grateful that you took the opportunity. For those who didn't see the poignant images of Representative Kim cleaning the Capitol in the moments, hours after the January 6th insurrection, this moment kind of reminds me of that it is just your instinct to help, to do whatever it is that you can to help those in need. And we know that, in the lead up, but certainly after Afghanistan fell to the Taliban, you immediately were one of the leading voices in Washington and beyond for helping Afghans and Americans to fleeing the Taliban. And we are so grateful for your instinct, which is very closely aligned with our values to help others.
No, well, thanks, Haley. I mean, you and I, we've had a chance to be able to know each other and work together for years now, and there's a lot of us that have that instinct of just trying to figure out what we can do. I think about this quote a lot. I don't remember if it was Coretta Scott King. I think it was attributed to her, but saying, kind of paraphrasing it. In difficult and challenging times, don't throw up your hands, roll up your sleeves. And I think that I think about that kind of attitude a lot. Just doing what I can. I literally this morning, on the phone with 2 American citizens there, fearful about what they're going to face today. So if I can bring any measure of help to them, that's what we got to stay focused on right now. That there are people right now very much in harm's way. So thank you everyone for paying attention and for your willingness to help. I'll certainly stay in touch with all of you, and there'll be certainly lots of ways that we can try to chip in and do our part. And that's what it's really about. So thank you so very much, and keep paying attention. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. And we will now turn to HIAS, starting with Mark. Hi, Mark. So much has happened in the past 2 weeks in terms of Afghanistan, and we know and we are proud of the fact that HIAS, as a Jewish organization, is leading when it comes to the resettlement of refugees from around the world, but in this moment, really responding to the crisis in Afghanistan. Could you speak a bit about HIAS's work in the past 2 weeks and what you see as the biggest challenges going forward?
Sure, and it was really appropriate to end with Congressman Kim's words that we're at a point now where we really shouldn't be, where we really need to roll up our sleeves, which is exactly what we're doing. So HIAS right now has staff deployed to the various military bases like Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, Fort Dix in New Jersey, as well as Fort Lee and in Virginia, and Fort Bliss in Texas, helping to welcome those people who are coming as parolees through the Special Immigrant Visa Program. Our network around the country of Jewish Family Service and other local community agencies are getting ready to resettle these parolees and these Special Immigrant Visa holders. And we are also furiously advocating on getting these humanitarian evacuations going, on creating a safe humanitarian corridor for people who need to leave Afghanistan right now. So we really are going on all pistons.
And Representative Kim touched on this, but we shouldn't assume that everyone understands the different kinds of visas and even the SIVs. Could you talk about that just so we can understand that people are coming in, and I know this is a challenge with different kinds of visas and papers and kind of how this is happening, frankly, what more needs to be done to expedite this process?
Sure. I'll say one thing quickly, which is in 1980, you know how our immigration system is totally broken and we say that Congress has abdicated its responsibility. That's actually not true with refugee resettlement. Congress created the tools that the president needs to rescue and resettle refugees. But over the last 4 decades, since the passage of the Refugee Act of 1980, in administration after administration, the refugee program has become so mired in red tape that rescue has become really difficult. So when we're done rolling up our sleeves, we need to look back and straighten that out. But in the meantime, they've had to create these extra channels because the refugee resettlement program is so mired in red tape and extreme vetting. One of those is the special immigrant visa program. Now, everybody who's coming in as a special immigrant under this program really could easily meet the refugee definition. I mean, they are running for their lives. They have a fear of persecution based on the relationship with the United States government, but because of the way the refugee program functions or malfunctions, this special program was created. It is a 14-step process that people have to go through, which was started in 2006. It has been cited in study after study by the GAO and by many advocates like HIAS as being a really dysfunctional and difficult process to navigate. But nonetheless, it is an escape route, albeit one with 14 obstacles on the way, for people who have put their lives on the line to assist the United States forces in Afghanistan. And because people couldn't get through that process very easily, now they're just being taken out anyway and being brought to the United States under a status called parole, and being allowed to complete their application here in the United States. So that's what a special immigrant is in the special immigrant visa program. There's one for Afghans. There used to also be one for Iraqis as well who made similar sacrifices. And then there are the refugees, the people who don't necessarily fit into the special immigrant visa program for one reason or another. The people who have fear of persecution based on other things, as activists, as women activists, as religious minorities, as people who are critical of the Taliban, or people who have also assisted the U.S. in other ways. People assisting U.S.-based NGOs or people who work with U.S.-based media. These are all people who have a fear of persecution as well. But they're being told by the State Department that they have to leave Afghanistan and actually become refugees before they can apply for protection. Some of those may be finding their way out right now through some of these flights that were going on. And then once they do, they can apply to the refugee program. But that's basically the various avenues of exit.
And I'm glad you talked about HIAS being at the bases to welcome the refugees. But unfortunately, there's just a handful of these locations at the moment. I was just in Detroit yesterday where they talked about the fact that they wanted to host Afghan refugees, and for whatever reason, it hasn't happened yet. Can if there are cities that want to become a sanctuary city, what is the holdup? What is the issue in terms of bringing refugees to as many locations as possible in the United States?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that this is another problem with our refugee resettlement system, is it was decimated over the last 4 years during the Trump administration. Our capacity both to process people overseas as well as to receive them here in the United States was absolutely devastated. As you know, when President Obama left office, the refugee ceiling was 110,000. This year, when President Trump left office, it was 15,000. And in doing that, we went from 300 resettlement sites around the country for the 9 resettlement agencies to 200. We lost a third of our sites, and the existing sites were existing on very thin capacity. And then on top of that, you had the pandemic, which made things obviously even worse on the overseas end as well as within the United States. Fortunately, President Biden did declare that the refugee ceiling for next year, he intended to raise it to 125,000. This is before the Afghan crisis. And the State Department had already issued a request for proposals instructing the voluntary agencies over the summer to build up their capacity in that direction, which we have all been doing. So we are in a better position now to receive them. But, you know, they still have to go through the bases and then be received by us. They still have to escape. So they will be coming, and they will be coming in significant numbers, and we will need assistance. Our affiliates around the country, and again, there are 200 sites affiliated with HIAS, and the 8 other resettlement agencies are going to need volunteers. They're going to need donations. They're going to need furniture. They're going to need assistance with housing, and they're going to need cash, because we get our local sites have to resettle a refugee, and they get in federal assistance $1,225 per refugee. That's supposed to cover up to 3 months of rent. We have to furnish the apartment with that. We have to stock it with food, and we also, that doesn't even, we have to give them cash assistance. And don't forget that today you can't survive without connectivity, especially during the pandemic, and that isn't covered either. So there are a lot of things that we need to cover. This is a public-private partnership, and we're going to need a lot of private assistance as well as public assistance to make this work.
Mark, I know you have to go. You have a big interview coming up on TV, and you can all see Mark, I think, later today on NBC. But before we move and hear from Naomi, if we could leave us on a hopeful note with a story, one story that's really stuck out for you in terms of, HIAS's role of getting someone out of Afghanistan and bringing them here to the United States.
Oh, I mean, well, it's just happened. We have somebody fantastic on staff, and if you have whose name is Yolda, and not only has she gotten out of Afghanistan, but she has also been assisting Afghans resettle in the New York City area. So rather than me telling her story, you should go to the HIAS website and watch her talk about it herself. Naomi and I and Yolda did a webinar on the HIAS.org site just a couple of days ago. But what's really, it's unfair to come up with any one story, because every single one of these Afghans really laid their lives on the line for the United States. We did not go there for Afghanistan. We went there for U.S. national security reasons, and they were there to help us and to protect our troops. And so we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. And with that, we will seamlessly bring in Naomi. And good luck, Mark, with your interview. Naomi, as Jews, we're so proud of the fact that HIAS as a Jewish organization is truly living its values in terms of its work being driven by this fundamental belief that we welcome the stranger. Can you talk a bit about the Jewish values that drive HIAS's work? And then also we've received a question about whether there are any Jews being evacuated from Afghanistan.
I'll start with, first of all, thank you for having me, for having Mark, for having HIAS. It was an honor to be sharing the same panel with Representative Kim and with all of you. I'll start with the second question first, which is, we are not aware of a Jewish community per se in Afghanistan at this point. Perhaps some of you know better. It was our understanding that the quote unquote one remaining Jew had already left Afghanistan. But what I will say is that HIAS has been advocating for, and we're following the recommendation of USCIRF, the United States Commission of International Religious Freedom, asking for what we call a P2 designation for religious minorities in Afghanistan. And a P2, as Mark was talking about all the different ways that people can get here, it's essentially a streamlined means to access the program. It does not guarantee you admission, but it draws a tight parameter around certain groups of individuals that will then have access to the process. And we have been saying that in addition to people who have employment-based connections to the US mission who need to get out, we think religious minorities need to be part of that. So that includes Sikhs and Hindus and Christian converts and Zoroastrians, if there are any remaining Jews, Shia Muslims. And so we've been really pushing hard for that. And then the first question you asked about our Jewish values, I mean, you hit on one of the major ones, which is welcoming the stranger, right? I mean, that is so baked into everything we do, it's hard to separate it. But we also are coming not just from our faith values, but from our shared history. I'm not sure that any one of our families, if you look back far enough, doesn't have a refugee story. And so, as we like to say that we used to help refugees because they were Jewish, and now we help refugees because we are Jewish. It is so much a part of who we are as a Jewish community in this country. And one of the things, Mark was talking about, it's hard to pick out one Afghan story that's particularly inspiring or touching. But one of the stories that I think is extraordinarily touching over the last 2 weeks, but not one that surprises me at all, is the outpouring of support from American Jews. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of requests. How can we help? Where can we plug in? And that just is another example to me of how committed we are to refugee welcome and how committed we feel particularly to this population. So that is a story that gives me a lot of hope.
Well, it's definitely consistent with what we see as well, which is why JDCA has now had 2 events in 2 weeks, and we're going to continue to discuss this issue, including, along the lines of what Representative Kim talked about, well beyond when it's out of the headlines and perhaps even out of the consciousness of the media. But there is an imminent and pressing need and questions that we are getting of what more can we do now in this moment. So I know we've talked a lot, but if you could give us some concrete steps that we can all be taking, including in advocating and pushing our members of Congress to do.
Yes. I love this question. So the first is to do a little bit of a plug for HIAS. You should go to our website because we have an entire page dedicated to how you can take action in response to this Afghan refugee crisis. And I'll walk through some of what that page contains, and I'll talk about volunteering, I'll talk about advocacy. I do just want to say though that, as Mark suggested, I know that people want to help now, and I do not want to dissuade you from doing that, but this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So even when it does fade from the front pages of the papers, and even when it's not on cable news all of the time, HIAS and other resettlement partners are going to be working with this community, with this population for years to come. So, so get involved now, but also get involved later. And so if there are challenges getting involved now because the agencies are getting inundated with requests, be patient, because there will be, unfortunately, plenty of need for a long time. But what HIAS is asking for, and the way HIAS is directing people to help, I'll start with the advocacy piece. On our website, we have an action alert, and we want as many of you to get involved with that as possible. Share it with your friends and families. It's to President Biden. It is about humanitarian evacuations. I should also say that I bet some of you saw yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening, we sent around a Jewish organizational sign-on letter that goes beyond our evacuation ask. It goes into more detail about religious minorities and about things we want to see from the administration. If any of you are representing organizations, please do consider signing on to that. We want that to raise a lot of alarms, ring a lot of bells, and get a lot of attention. So reach out to your elected officials, reach out to people to say, we in the American Jewish community, we have our eyes on the administration and we want to see some things happen. We want to see Afghans continue to be evacuated for as long as they need to be. So those that supported the US mission, those who were affiliated in other ways with the US government, religious minorities, activists, we need to see that. We need to see a long-term commitment from the Biden administration that they are committed to the humanitarian and protection angle with this. So those are our advocacy asks. Also, there are volunteer opportunities. And I saw in the chat, somebody talked about JFS in San Diego, which is one of our partners. Afghans will be arriving in communities around the country. That's going to take a little bit of time, but it is going to happen. So you should go to our website and check out the different ways that you can volunteer. And while on these types of calls, I usually plug HIAS to the nth degree, HIAS, we have resettlement affiliates in 17 communities around the country, but we're not everywhere. But you should look and see if there are other resettlement agencies that have affiliates in your communities. Doesn't have to be a HIAS affiliated organization. You should reach out to them, get on a waiting list, see what they need in your local community. So we've got advocating, we've got volunteerism, and then also, as Mark said, donations, right? Donations to organizations like HIAS help us do our advocacy, help us prep our network, but also to the local organizations, because they are going to need help with everything Mark said, from furniture to clothes to medical care. And so those are the three primary ways: advocacy, volunteering, and donating.
Great, thank you. And I would also say JDCA also has an action item to write to your member of Congress to provide additional funding for refugee resettlement in the budget reconciliation bill. But we've also been sharing.
That's wonderful.
We've also been sharing HIAS's links as well. We are all about promoting other organizations doing wonderful work in this space. And we've gotten questions about links to your website. We will post it in the chat as well.
Okay. I was just going to say, in terms of the appropriations piece, one really important thing that we're asking for right now is some of the people who are going to be coming in, many of the Afghans coming in, as Mark said, are coming in on a status known as humanitarian parole. And the way that is written in immigration law, it does not make them automatically eligible or eligible at all for longer term support, like refugees who come in through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program do. So we are really pushing to make sure that there is funding available for that longer term support. We don't want to see one single Afghan person coming in, not be able to get housing, not be able to have longer term psychosocial support, not be able to have the cash assistance they need. So this is definitely a long game from an appropriations angle too.
So, Naomi, a lot of things have come up on this call that have led, at least me, to additional questions. And I'm going to try to tie in some of the audience questions here as well. But, you know, Representative Kim said something along the lines of there will be a last American plane to leave. There are a lot of questions about then what happens next. How do people get out? And there are a lot of concerns, especially about women and girls. So if you can speak to kind of what comes next, when that final plane leaves, what comes next? Are there organizations that will remain on the ground? The Red Cross was mentioned, that will protect Afghans from the Taliban, and especially women and girls.
It's such an important question. And I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to predict what's going to happen after that last US plane leaves. There are NGOs on the ground in Afghanistan now, local NGOs, national NGOs, and international NGOs doing the most amazing work. We can't predict what's going to happen, you know, in 2 months, 3 months, or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what's going to happen if they'll be able to continue to operate as they have been. We've already been hearing reports that some of the organizations that have been allowed to continue to work have had to change how they do it, you know, that their women employees have been forced to stay at home and they've had to curtail their activities. And so it is a big question. I will say, to the plug to one of our really important partner organizations, we work with Islamic Relief very, very closely with our operations in Greece on the island of Lesbos. And we are so proud of that relationship. Islamic Relief is on the ground in Afghanistan now, and I know that many other organizations are desperately trying to stay, and particularly to help women and girls. I will also say that when that last plane leaves, there are going to be people who still desperately need to get out of the country. And so our advocacy is slowly evolving, not to stop talking about evacuations, but to talk about the need for land borders to be open, so for people to be able to safely access territory in Pakistan, in Iran, in Tajikistan, because that's happening in fits and starts now. But the reality is that those countries will need to be able to allow Afghans to access their territories. And as the US and the international community, we need to make sure that they have the resources to adequately house them, welcome them, while other longer term solutions are figured out.
And just to clarify, does HIAS have staff, I think Mark referenced at least one, in Afghanistan? And,
no,
they're partners?
No, so we are not operational in Afghanistan or in that region. Our partner in broader work, Islamic Relief, is there, but we don't partner with their work in Afghanistan. I just wanted people to know about their existence there and the work that they're doing, but we are not operational in the region. Our major interaction with Afghan refugees thus far, up until this point, has been through the resettlement program and through SIVs arriving in the United States, and also our work in Greece. We are on the island of Lesbos, and we have been for years providing legal support and psychosocial support, and well over half of our clients there are from Afghanistan, and we expect that those numbers will grow.
Great. And, you know, So wondering if you could reflect briefly on today's events. We saw this tragic explosion outside or on the perimeter of the airport. We've heard since that American service members were killed. We're still learning the details. Are you concerned that this will impede our efforts to get Afghans out of the country and get
Yes.
Americans out of the country?
Yes. Yes, full stop. I don't know what else to say about that except yes, it just made an already excruciatingly difficult situation that much more difficult. Yes, we're desperately concerned.
And again, we're getting questions about what more we can do. So this will be the final question, but for those who don't live in Representative Kim's district, and he talked about the base, there are other bases in other districts that are housing and holding refugees. Where is there a good resource that people can go to and share? It looks like there's a lot of interest in sharing this information with their synagogues.
Yes.
So what can we do to share this information with our communities?
Well, I will say that if you are a member of a synagogue that is not part of HIAS's Welcome campaign, we should work on changing that, because we now have a network of hundreds upon hundreds. I actually honestly forget the number right now. It's well over 500 of congregations around the country that have committed with HIAS to serving refugees in one way or the other. You know, there's a whole spectrum of ways you can help. If your synagogue is not already part of that, please reach out, because we are reaching out directly to our Welcome congregation network. The other thing is that, of course, people are coming into these military bases, and we are still honestly sorting out what kind of assistance they need and what kind of assistance could be available from the general public. But keep in mind, they're not meant to stay at these military bases for long. The idea is to get them out into safe, secure housing into communities as quickly as possible. So it could very well be that if you're in a community where there is a military base, you will hear a cry from refugee organizations or from offices like Representative Kim's to say, help us in this way at these bases. But that's a little bit TBD. I don't want to dissuade you from inquiring about that, but we don't have that answer yet. I would instead, though, suggest that you reach out to your local refugee resettlement organization, if there is one in your community, and say, how can we help you once Afghans actually start coming into the communities?
Great. Well, we want to thank you, Naomi. We want to thank Mark, and we want to thank Representative Kim for sharing this very important information, including really a call to action for all of us of how we can do more to help amid this crisis. And with that, I will pass it to our Director of Programming and Strategy, Bobby Saferstein, to conclude our program. Bobby.
Thanks, Haley. And of course, thank you to all of our speakers and all of you at home for joining us for this important and urgent community conversation on the evacuations out of Afghanistan and what we can do to help with refugees and resettlement efforts right now, and then in the coming days, weeks, and months. Of course, it's easy to feel helpless as we continue to watch the news and learn more about today's events and what we've seen unfolding over the past few weeks, but we are not helpless. And as we've heard today from Representative Kim and Mark and Naomi from HIAS, there are many ways for us to roll up our sleeves and help. Our tradition, our Jewish tradition, commands us to welcome a stranger no less than 36 times. V'ahavta lo kamocha ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. For we are to love this stranger as ourselves, because we too were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Please visit the websites of HIAS, No One Left Behind, Women for Afghan Women, the International Refugee Assistance Project, Westchester Jewish Coalition for Immigration, the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, Islamic Relief, which is working with HIAS on the island of Lesbos in Greece, and so many others. To learn more about local efforts in your communities, please visit find.usahello.org to learn about all the ways you can help with Afghan refugee resettlement. Again, local is going to be helping out. So please find out what will be the most effective in your communities. If you're an American, an SIV or P1 or P2 applicant or holder, please contact Representative Andy Kim's office by emailing Rep Kim Evac at mail.house.gov. And also, when it's ready, Andy Kim New Jersey's website. We also encourage you to go to our website at jewishdems.org, where you can help us take action by encouraging Congress does everything in its power to support the evacuation and resettlement of refugees, Americans, and US partners. While there, you will also learn about how you can support JDCA and conversations like these, our JDCA membership program, and how to join one of our 16 state and local JDCA chapters and events, including our series of phone banks to help stop the recall of California Governor Gavin Newsom. Our next national phone bank will take place this Sunday, August 29th at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be a very close vote, and we need your help. So please join us. We'll continue to keep you posted as we learn more about what's going on in Afghanistan. But for now, we ask you to visit those websites of the organizations we listed before. Time is running out to bring those at risk to safety and to ensure that those who are left behind remain safe, secure, and are never forgotten. And also that those who arrive in the United States have immediate and long-term support. So please get involved now and be prepared to get involved later. We mourn the victims of today's attack, wish a speedy recovery to all those who are injured, and pray for the safe evacuation of those still left in Afghanistan. Thank you again for joining us. We wish you an early Shabbat Shalom and look forward to seeing you on Sunday and at all of our future upcoming JDCA events. Take care and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.